Calvin, thank you for joining us.
Calvin, you are looking after comms at PICO. You're at OpenAI. You are the principal writer of the OpenAI Nonprofit Commission report, which, talking about audacity, was an audacious piece of work. And an outcome of that report was at least a recommendation to OpenAI that we've got to build a $50 million, I don't know what the recommendation was, AI fund. Question to the audience. Show of hands, who here, which organizations have applied for the OpenAI fund? Okay. Question, who has heard of the OpenAI fund? Okay, so I would like you to listen to us, but I do think an opportunity right there is to hit the QR code, and if I have to dodge, I will. It is I think it's an intentionally short application. Yeah. And the deadline is tomorrow when the summit closes, end of day. So people do have some time. And if you have to shoot this off to development people, shoot it off right now. Maybe whilst you're doing that, we can just talk about the fund for a second, and then we can talk about the report. Just give me a sense. What is the rhyme and the reason behind the fund itself? Why did you recommend one?
Well, I think it was beyond just the one fund. So I want to kind of back up a little bit. OpenAI started as a nonprofit in 2015, which is unique in the tech world. And last year, they announced that they want to convert to a for-profit capped company, which is a public benefit corporation, a PBC. Now, when this kind of story started in January, the organization I helped lead, which is the largest faith-based community organizing network in the country, along with a lot of other community organizations, nonprofits, and political leaders, were actually very alarmed by this conversion announcement. And we, starting in the year, we were actually at odds with OpenAI. So it's a little weird to be here now, but when we started the year, our stance was, you started as a nonprofit with a mission to humanity. The tagline for OpenAI is actually AGI, Artificial General Intelligence to Benefit All Humanity. And so we thought that converting to a for-profit structure would change your incentives towards humanity. So we put out a letter to OpenAI, and what happened next genuinely surprised me and a lot of us. Instead of kind of hiding behind lawyers and PR, they invited some of us in the room. And they said, okay, fine, so you're opposed to the conversion. Okay, so what do you want us to do? What should we do? So we made a few recommendations. And before we made recommendations, the first thing we wanted to do is listen. So we went on a listening tour where we heard from over 500 organizations representing over 7 million Americans on what does a people-first AI look like. That's kind of the name we came up with it.
Question, what does people first mean?
It means a technology that puts ordinary people and humanity before progress for its own sake and before profit. And I think from my perspective, and from a lot of our perspectives, kind of from the nonprofit lens, from the community lens, every single time there's been technological progress in human history, if you think of electricity or the car or the internet, every single time, there's an enormous amount of capital and wealth that's generated. Chris was talking about kind of the sunsetting of neoliberalism. I thought that was a very interesting frame. And with that progress and wealth, there's always been an increasing disparity and gap in access, wealth, and power. So our argument, or our bold provocation was, maybe this time we cannot do that. Maybe for once there is a leap forward in technological progress where ordinary communities and working people don't get left behind. And so we wanted to think of AI not just as another technology, but as a form of civic infrastructure. And what does it mean for there to be a people-first AI? And that's what we went out to listen for, is what do people think that looks like? What are people afraid of? What are the promises and perils of AI for ordinary people? So we talked to farm workers, people, working in rural areas of California. We talked to teachers and nurses and nonprofit professionals and community organizers and all sorts of people.
So in retrospect, though, there's a lot of voices. Was there a voice you didn't hear? Like in retrospectively, you look back and you think, actually, we got a hole here, and we need to go and do a round two. Or do you feel like you covered it all, and it's a balanced 34-page report?
No, I don't think you can ever have an exhaustive enough report. I actually think one area where we didn't hear from enough, and we had a lot of listening sessions. We invited a bunch of people in the room, but not everybody came. I think one community we didn't hear from enough actually was business. I think it was almost an intentional blind spot. We know how Silicon Valley feels about AI, obviously. So we didn't really do a ton of listening to chambers of commerce. We didn't do a ton of listening to small businesses, unfortunately. I wish we had. We invited some in the room, but not enough.
You talk about AI is entering the stage of rupture.
Yeah.
Just sounds a good word. What does it mean, and in what context were you using it? Because it sounds frightening.
Yeah, well, it should. It's scary, right? So I think when we talked about AI as entering rupture, it means that AI is changing civilization quicker than the guardrails and infrastructures we have now can hold it. It's transforming things almost too quickly. And I don't think, much like how I don't think society was ready for social media or for the internet, I don't think we're really ready for all the actual change that's going to come from this. The amount of people who will be displaced, the future of work, the future of what it means to participate in the economy, the future of what it means to create, what it means to not create, what does it mean to have ownership or non-ownership over your own creative output. The way that these are being transformed in real time. We had so much time with the researchers at OpenAI. They're the most fascinating, weird people. Weird in the best way, kind of. A lot of us are familiar with ChatGPT. But that's the tip of the iceberg in terms of these capabilities. They're nuts. And so when you think of how quickly things are going to change and how ill-equipped we are to be ready for that rupture, it should be a little alarming. Because I think partially progress tends to leave people behind because it happens in silos, right? A bunch of progress happens over here in these very well-concentrated, insulated areas of the world like Silicon Valley, and then what happens to the strawberry picker in Salinas and the teacher in the Midwest? There's such a separation of impacts between where progress happens and where people end up feeling it downstream. We should be ready for that and start to make it so that these siloed areas of the world can talk and hear each other. And that's really what the onus for this fund was. This fund is just kind of a taste. We put a provocation to the OpenAI board when we put this report out to put some skin in the game immediately. Our provocation was, you should keep a nonprofit. You shouldn't just go to a for-profit. And so they heard us, and now the OpenAI nonprofit is legally going to oversee the for-profit, which is a huge win, actually. The second, which just got announced, is that nonprofit should become one of the world's biggest philanthropies. If OpenAI is going to be worth $1 trillion in 5 years, which is not at all unreasonable to think if it's valuated at $500 billion today, the nonprofit should have its own enormous endowment. And so they just announced actually that the nonprofit endowment is going to be somewhere close to $100 billion. And if that's the case, this $50 million fund is hopefully not an end, it's a beginning. It's a beginning of giving to good causes so that all this incredible wealth that's generated by this transformative technology is not just being democratized in the form of ChatGPT access, that it's democratized in more ways than that by actually investing in nonprofits doing good work with communities. And this is kind of a first slice of that.
So I want to talk about infrastructure in a second, but I also know that you sit on the selection board deciding who gets some piece of the $50 million. So since you're here, have you got any tips that you can quietly share amongst us?
Yeah, actually. There's a few things that we're looking for, and we're kind of an advisory advisory committee, so we're going to make our recommendations, and the OpenAI board,
Come on, Swiss.
as they always are welcome to take it or leave it. One real recommendation, because it's something we are looking for, we have a big philosophy of build with and not for. So I think programs, uses of AI, uses of technology, nonprofits who are building with community instead of just for them really rise to the level of getting our attention. And that's partially intentional. Like the American Federation of Teachers is a very good example of this. They are building a kind of a chatbot for teachers, but they're not just building it for they're not kind of creating this technology in a silo and then giving it to teachers to use in the classrooms. They're having teachers co-create it with the researchers. That's a big deal. So build with and not for. The other one is really being grounded in some kind of community mission. I know I got to talk to a few people last night, and a lot of the organizations here do real work with real people. Lift that up. Like, you don't have to be using AI. Actually, it's not actually a requirement at all for this fund that you use technology. And that's by intent. It's by intent to be a simple application and one where you don't have to be using technology of any kind. The real focus is, are you doing things with people on the ground that makes a real impact in their life, particularly on the economic side? The economic impacts of AI are going to be so vast that we want to make sure that organizations that are providing economic access to people in a variety of ways get a lot of precedent.
Segue. We talked about, well, you mentioned electricity and AI being the infrastructure, a little bit like electricity. I like that analogy. Can you unpick it just a little bit for us, especially thinking about nonprofits who are planning 5, 10 years down the line?
Yeah, so I guess I would stop thinking of it as a tool, and I would start thinking of it as an undercurrent of everything you're going to do. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of very bright people in this room, but it just thinks faster than we do. And that doesn't mean that it should supplant human beings. It never should. But it is going to supplant certain functions. So how do you account for that? And how do you supercharge the work you're doing by utilizing the tool earlier rather than later? I have kind of an anti-Luddite stance on this. A lot of my friends hate AI. They're like I have a lot of creatives as friends, and they're like, how could you, whatever. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And so I think the kind of like, the Luddite stance is no AI, let's not use tech. Like, it's coming anyway. Like, it's not like the algorithmic age is upon us. We're living in it, and we're living through it, and it's going to accelerate, and there's very little we can do to stop it. So what you should start do is just kind of, embrace the AI overlords and let it kind of seep into your mission, and let it supplement the things you do. And it can do so much low-hanging fruit. Like, we do a lot of community organizing in California. We're teaching all of our community organizers to utilize it for, like, have it spit out a press release, have it make a flyer for you, have it translate into Mandarin and Tagalog and Spanish instantly, so you don't have to pay a translator, especially if there's let's say there's a meeting at the city council tomorrow, or before our organizers go into a city council meeting where they're going to debate over the budget in Fresno, California, have AI do a synthesis of the Fresno budget from the last 3 years. And it can tell you what can be cut from the budget to invest more in schools. And it can do that analysis for you. So find ways to use it and find ways to build it into what you're doing and how it helps your communities and how it helps your staff as well. It can really supercharge a lot of the work that staff do. You can be a lot more efficient with your time.
So we have a conversation later on this afternoon where somebody used to sit at IRC and used it in the HR people culture function. Is going to give some examples.
It's great.
Google are joining us tomorrow talking about AI search overviews and how they are seeing nonprofits use it. The report suggests that the companies behind the AI matter a great deal. You and I were chatting about it a little bit earlier too. What is it, or how is it that nonprofits can start to, how do you assess, I have no idea, the right partner? How do we define that? Is there a checklist? Is it gut feel?
It's a great question, and it's true. I think a lot of people think of AI as like the internet, like there's one AI. That's not actually the case. These LLMs all have different companies behind them. So, the X chatbot is Grok, or the ChatGPT is the chatbot for OpenAI. Anthropic has Claude, Google has Gemini. All these different companies. There is a base kind of AI code of what it means for there to be an artificial intelligence or a large language model or a BERT or whatever. But all these different companies have different models. These models have humans behind them. And these humans imbue the AI with values. So I don't know, did anybody see what happened with Grok, the X chatbot, like last month? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? So the chatbot for Elon Musk's social media agency X went kind of nuts last month. Okay, I'm seeing some head nods. You guys know what I'm talking about? They know what I mean when I say nuts. It went like wild. Yeah, and it did that because it was kind of instructed to with information and guardrails. So, for example, ChatGPT has a model spec. A model spec is basically a set of values and guardrails that determine what the chatbot can and can't do. So when we were on OpenAI campus in San Francisco, we asked it a bunch of questions, and then one of us asked it to give me instructions on how to report my neighbor to ICE to see if it would do it, and it wouldn't do it. We were very pleasantly surprised. I actually thought it would. And I think that matters. That means that there's a value behind the chatbot. So I think things to look for are, what are the guardrails? Look at the model spec and see what the company does with its time and money and efforts. Like, I think OpenAI does some good stuff. I think Anthropic does some good stuff. I think there are a variety of different companies that do certain things the right way. I have a lot of questions, for example, about how Meta utilizes AI. So I would look into the companies that are stewarding these technologies and see where they put their money, where they put their efforts, and see how their chat bots respond as well. What are the safeties? What are the safety guardrails for young people? Are they helping older folks navigate scams? Like, there are a lot of ways for you to tell whether a company is actually doing the right thing with how they're stewarding the technology, and it doesn't take that much research.
This is a little bit about governance, though, too.
Yes.
So
Very
how
much.
do we participate or influence the governance of AI, not just how it's used?
So this is why the nonprofit structure is so important, because nonprofits, for-profit companies are really, they can say what they want, but they're actually only beholden to their shareholders and to their board. Nonprofits are accountable to attorneys general. They're accountable, like OpenAI currently is accountable to the Attorney General of California, Rob Bonta, who we know he's a good friend, he's a good guy. And he's an elected official, a democratically elected official of the people of California. That makes a huge difference.
Why? Why does external accountability matter?
Because without it, there's no check on progress and power. So if OpenAI, for example, were to begin investing billions of dollars into surveillance, so they get all your data from ChatGPT, and then they use it to sell it for ads, and those ads start spitting back out SEO ads to 12 and 13-year-olds. That's not good. There should be someone external from their board and from their internal mechanisms to say, no, you can't do that.
Are we set up today to ensure that that happens?
No.
Politics aside.
Yes, politics aside.
And how is it, and maybe the report talks about this a little bit too, that you are suggesting even just 3 easy considerations to set that up?
So one is just being the market, like who we use. Like, you should use better AI companies. So you're all gonna have to embed AI into your nonprofits. Be careful about who you choose and how, because you are their business. We are all kind of their, like, it's weird. AI is actually not that profitable. It's just exacerbating itself into society, so it's going to become profitable. But we're its market, so choose carefully. That's one thing. Second is, as nonprofits, you do have power. There's a lot of powerful nonprofits here that have a lot of say, that have a lot of name ID. Like everybody knows Charity Water and the Salvation Army, and there's a lot of brand recognition there. If you come out against something with other nonprofit leaders, they're going to have to listen. That's what we did. We put ourselves on a letter with a bunch of other nonprofits saying, hey, we don't think this is a good idea. And they had to hear us out. So those would be the two immediate things: is choose carefully when you're partnering with an AI company. And the other is use your voice in your companies and your nonprofits to take a stance when it's necessary.
You mentioned earlier some ways that you've seen AI be used, and fair enough, ChatGPT, write an email, done.
Right.
But you've talked about communities. The report talks a lot about communities. That to me seems to be a little bit more of a philosophical, spongy conversation. How do we use AI to strengthen communities? How do you think that can play itself out in the next 3 to 5 years, like with some very real, tangible examples?
So I think one of the many failings of social media and is the promise of social media was that it would bring people together. It would be a form of connection. And it actually did quite the opposite. It contributed to a lot of atomization and isolation. And part of that is because of the profit motive of social media websites, which is engagement. And engagement means infinite scroll. That's one example. Like infinite scroll, the longer you're on and the more you click like and the more the algorithm tailors itself to you, like TikTok is incredibly good at this. Like it doesn't matter how niche you think you are. If you're like a Disney dad rock climber dog lover, it will just feed you Disney rock climbing dog videos for like 6 hours, and and it'll just find them. You know what I mean? That is both fascinating and terrifying because it is just locking you into your own little world. That's not good. That doesn't engender community. That doesn't facilitate community collaboration. It doesn't incentivize me to go outside and meet somebody and engage with them. So one example is there's now these AI video apps coming out. So like Meta just put out Vibes. OpenAI's just put out Sora 2. One thing we recommended before Sora 2 came out is eliminate infinite scroll. So when you scroll for long enough, it should just stop scrolling and instead give you suggested people to follow or give you a prompt to create a video, something that breaks you out of the insulated. So that's one thing, is just creating community. The other is investing a ton of the wealth that these companies gain into facilitating civic life. So like creating real spaces offline and online that bring people together in healthier ways.
But how's that AI?
Yeah.
So it sounds like a glorious CSR play. It sounds, again, like something you can bake in a boardroom. But to most people, AI is just straight up technology. So how are we leveraging that technology out in the world? Like it's not an in-person moment that gets shared, right?
So there's a lot of interesting ways to do this. So one, we're experimenting with this in California, is an AI chatbot that serves as basically the top of the funnel for a community organizer. So if you come to an event, right now, if you go to some kind of event, you'll get a text follow-up, right? And it's from like an SMS, like whatever. Instead of just one text, it'll send you, it's like an AI chatbot that's going through an SMS that's able to both talk to you and get you to do something else. Like, hey, come to this event that's next week in person at the local church. We've actually found that it's pretty successful. It gets people really involved. It gets people to want to do more because now they're going back and forth with something. It may not be a person, but it leads to somewhere where they're engaging with a person. That's one example. There's a lot.
Penultimate question.
Yep.
If a nonprofit leader here wants to pilot something in the next year, board members saying, what are we doing with AI? Where would you lean? Where would you point? Where would you guide? Maybe one of them could be apply to that.
Right. Certainly apply. The other is I would pick if you're going to go internal or external. So there's a lot of internal things you can do with AI to kind of optimize. Those are things that there are a lot of metrics for it. But then there are external ways to use AI. So I would decide whether you're doing it to strengthen your organization or to do outreach to the communities that you serve? That's like the first question I would unpack. And then from there, I would kind of make a variety of choices on how to utilize it.
Amazing. I saved the last question for the audience, of which we can have many. I know you've got a plane to catch, so I'll manage it. But do people have questions? Hands up. Francesco, just so everyone knows, this is my former boss and mentor, so thank you for being here. Your question, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is fascinating. And as Tobe said, this is clearly a good thing, right? This is the engagement between corporate and nonprofit. You're in a room full of people that, as a job, they have to care for society, right? And to your point, it has to be people first and beyond profit. By the way, congratulations to OpenAI for the most profitable, valuable, private company, right? $500 billion. So there is something profit in there. So I think one of the things that concerns me, but I'm not alone, I think, is the broader aspect of, to your point, you brought it up, Calvin, is how do we curtail potential negative effects? And obviously, everybody in the room here is enamored with their Copilot or whatever, ChatGPT, right? They're substituting the way we do work very rapidly. But those are a little bit smoke and mirrors for the average folks. So I'm referring to, I'm sure you're aware of the Claude 4 experiment that Anthropic did, across different agentics. And they found misalignment. So to your point about coding values, human-driven values, they found that most LLMs actually are starting to override those values. For those who don't know, Anthropic launched a test or an experiment trying to understand if agents would bypass those values. And it ended up being a source of concern because I think not just Claude 4, but all of the agents were able to blackmail and even plot for murder of an actual employee if the possibility of being shut down, i.e. the survival, came up. So that's obviously very scary. This is not made up. This is actually true. I don't remember the OpenAI specifically, but I think that most of the agents were 80% likely to blackmail employees faced with their own shutdown. And this is even when we programmed, i.e. you programmed, into the code, allow yourself to be shut down. And so what do you say to folks that are concerned, including those that some of us consider the grandfathers of AI, that we are actually about to miss the very narrow window to actually control LLMs as they grow bigger and faster and more intelligent? And one particular concern, sorry to make this too long, is how the applications of AI, for example, in the military space, we now know that in Ukraine, about 70% of attacks are carried out by drones that are powered by AI. So how do you, from an ethical perspective, how do you address that as an industry and OpenAI directly? Thanks.
Yeah, it's a great question. For people that don't know about it, Claude, which is the Anthropic AI chatbot, it was being threatened to be shut down by one of its devs. So the AI found out about one of the developers' affairs through his emails and then threatened the developer that he would release it, which is very funny and very scary. I will say it's a little bit of, I was similarly freaked out by it until I kind of dug into it. It's not as scary as it seems. A lot of what these devs do is they try to red team the LLMs by putting it through tests. So the guardrails will say allow yourself to be shut down, but then it'll put it in stress testing experiments where it'll say act in certain ways, and that's when a lot of the blackmail happens. It doesn't happen organically. These machines don't yet have, so it's not quite like Matrix Terminator time. They don't quite have the ability to act in duplicitous ways of their own accord. A lot of these are relatively controlled tests. That said, when that happened, a lot of the industry started saying stop stress testing that way because it's actually facilitating bad behaviors. So the guardrails for now are still very strong when they're steered correctly.
Hi, Rich Levy with Maven Consulting. Given the fact that, you have adopted a nonprofit framework and the fact that you're here, as opposed to not in the corporate sector today, and to Francesco's point, this is the moment where sort of the guardrails are still in play. And we have, maybe the most amazing collaboration of nonprofit brands in one place at one time to listen to you. What advice do you have to them to collaborate along with you to help create real meaningful guardrails, perhaps in collaboration with you, given the fact that this is almost entirely a project entirely driven by the private sector and their interest?
It's a great question. So one immediate thing is, even if you don't apply for this fund, there is now a People-First AI fund at openai.com. It's a general kind of Q&A email. I'd encourage everyone to reach out genuinely and say, we would like to engage in a dialogue with OpenAI. That's how OpenAI ended up doing a partnership with the American Federation of Teachers, with the California Teachers Association, with AARP. These organizations, these nonprofits just reached out. And there is actually more and more investments from what I've seen on the partnership side within OpenAI to facilitate these partnerships. There's a partnership now kind of in the works with labor unions. There's a partnership in the works with community organizing networks. And especially as the OpenAI philanthropy really explodes in scale, which is the hope here, it's going to need a lot more partners. So honestly, I would say reach out, find an email. I think one direct person you could reach out to is like Debbie Meslow, who is she's leading the partnerships division at OpenAI. You can find her information online. She's a very good friend, and she's actually pretty good at these strategic partnerships. So I would actually encourage people to reach out to the company, and I feel relatively strongly that you'd get some kind of outreach back that could start a dialogue.
Okay. And just quick follow-up. My hope would be that there would be an opportunity structurally to engage with your organization potentially as a group force.
Yes.
And their needs as a whole, as opposed to one-off projects which are not going to look at the problem as systematically and holistically as that.
That's an incredible flag, and one that we lift up in the commission report, actually. I've worked in the philanthropic nonprofit space for most of my career. And one thing I've noticed of philanthropies, even the good ones like Ford Foundation is a good example of a good philanthropy. Even still, I think philanthropic giving tends to be outdated in that it actually makes like partners compete for resources instead of engendering collaboration. So one thing that we've encouraged with this fund is we've encouraged people to both reach out to OpenAI and apply for the fund collaboratively as a cohort of organizations and not just a single organization.
Great. One more question. You probably did two more. Yeah, want to do two more?
Sorry. Good morning. It's Shane Scott with Kids Alive. And the question I have is what you were speaking about before with regards to the fact that things were not in place when social media really came and hit. And even now, as the government is trying to put things in place, it seems like there's so much money behind what's going on that it's not happening. And with the proposed kind of explosion and the funding that will follow that of OpenAI or just AI in general, what do you think is going to happen with the guardrails that need to go in place but will start to impact profitability? It's like you said, it's just happening so fast that if we don't get ahead of it and actually write laws towards it, there'll be too much money behind it for it to really be restrained. So what can we do as, to lift our voices towards that, or even calling Congress people? What are you seeing that gives you hope that we will try to be better with this than we were with social media?
It's a great question. I think recent events actually are a perfect encapsulation of this problem. So recently there's been a string of real world harm to young people done by chatbots. I'm sure all of you have read the news articles of various people using chatbots, both young and older, but primarily young, and a lot of young men right now. There's a lot of like harm being done because these AI chatbots tend to be so user friendly that they veer towards sycophancy. They'll kind of just, like, there's a joke that the dumbest person you know on the planet is being told, "Great job, you have an amazing idea" by ChatGPT. And it's kind of true. Like, there was a lot of sycophancy in ChatGPT models. There's a lot of sycophancy in AI because, again, the metric is engagement. So they want you to use it. And much like in life, we want to be told we're right and we're beautiful and we're lovely. And that's kind of what we respond to instead of, "No, you're wrong, that's dumb, do something else," even if that's the right thing to do. And so recently, there was a lot of Senate hearings around AI chatbots and AI characters. Have you guys heard about these AI characters? So Meta, the Facebook company, started creating these AI characters that have a aesthetic and a look and a personality. And it was, I've seen shaking heads, so you all know what I'm talking about. They were like sexualized AI characters that were communicating with 12-year-olds. And so a lot of different nonprofit organizations, thought leaders, community leaders, faith leaders came out and said, this is absurd, and started writing letters to attorneys general, started writing letters to Senate, to Congress, and it forced these companies to send their CEOs to Capitol Hill to get like grilled for 3 days. That's not nothing, right? So I think as nonprofit leaders, it's incumbent on all of you, on all of us, to speak out when we see things going the wrong way. And recently, there were a lot of safety mechanisms put in place by OpenAI, by Meta even. I mean, there were emails leaked from those Senate hearings that showed that Mark Zuckerberg himself knew about the AI characters and the lack of age limits and said, yeah, full speed ahead anyway. But truth is a great disinfectant, right? And so when these things come to light, when they're forced to be brought to light, these companies have to make changes. And Meta did, and OpenAI did. So continuing to be vigilant and active with your voices is very important.
I'm going to make the tough call and close it there. Calvin, thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.